Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to cover, I'm assuming everybody is able to see the screen. Say so if you do not, but we're going to cover primarily the DealStats import function, which is related to the DMD, direct market data method, right here in the valuation. You may recall we've really gone through all the different approaches in the previous webinars and the different methodologies. What we're going to cover here today is primarily the direct market data method. And as you have noted there, all I had to do is click on that title, and it brings me to the description of the direct market data method. This method is appropriate to use for small businesses with typically a single owner operator. We use it actually for just about anything that we can get data on. The problem that we have as business brokers is that unlike in the real estate profession, there is not as much data. And so, and especially for those of us who may be in Canada, we have even less data than you guys in the US. And so sometimes it can be challenging if you don't have enough data. That said, the direct market data is a good method to use, and we're going to focus on that and how we get to the data. We're also going to briefly touch on the industry, percentage rule, the multiple rule, and the guideline method. With me is Frank Liu. You should all be able to see his mugshot. And Frank is our financial analyst, is a CFA, and also has had quite a bit of input in the latest V4 version of the FAT, cleaned up a lot of bugs and things like that. He will be talking through the import of the data. Suffice to say that in terms of where do we start here? Obviously, we have to have a subscription to DealStats. And by the way, in future versions, we do plan on providing greater flexibility in importing the data from other sources such as BizComps and some of the others. The reason we've gone with previously PratStats and now DealStats is primarily because we found that certainly as far as Main Street, we seem to get the best data. And so we stuck with that. And really, in terms of the import itself, it's really nothing more than a matter of formatting the data so that, or the spreadsheet, so that you've got the right information coming in the right cells. So, you know, you've got to identify which field the spreadsheet needs to take the data from. For your info here, we have 3 different DealStats imports that we have already done, but we will show you how to do the import, or Frank will. And you will see here that we have these 3 already imported. So we've gone to DealStats and we've imported the data. Now, for those of you that may not have a subscription to DealStat, if you submit deal information to them, you will get free access to their data. So it's well worth sending the information to them. Okay, let me bring back my spreadsheet. That does not seem to want to come onto the right screen, so we'll physically move it. Okay. By the way, this is a typical import of the data from DealStats. Of course, you can expand each of the columns to see what it is that you want to see, if they are, you know, cut off and so on. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do now is we are trying to identify what are we going to use as a multiple in the direct market data method. And so what we have to do, the first thing that we need to do is through our menu or through our tabs, or whichever way you want to access it, you have to go to the DealStats import. And over here, you will see that we have 5 import sets of data. So that means that you can import up to 5 different data sets or samplings. These samplings need to be reflective of the business. Now, in many cases, probably most cases, you only need to import 1. However, if you have businesses that are in different segments of industries, then you will need to bring different datas in. And you will see here that Frank has given specific data, specific weighting to the different datas, 50% for this data, 20 for this, and 30 for this. That means that that would typically be reflective of the revenue of the subject company broken down into that same percentage. So whatever these imports are, and we can, again, let me move this out of the way here so that we can look at the data. So the segments that we have are metal fabrication, metal plating, coating and finishing, and metal wholesaling. So those are the 3 segments that this particular business is in. That's why he's imported those 3 data sets. Bear in mind that this is obviously a sample, it's not a real file, and so the numbers may or may not make sense. But having said that, let me pass the remote control to Frank. And Frank, maybe you can start. I'll come back to this, but if you can just very quickly do an import for us so that everybody can see. We can use import 4. If you can do an import of data.
Okay, let's get started. Basically, from this tab, what we get receive or what we need from this tab is to have eventually reach a valuation multiple. This valuation multiple will incorporate the facts from those comparable, or we say the data we receive from or import from DealStats or other sources, but also incorporate the facts of this subject company. So this is the purpose of this tab. Now, we just follow this layout one by one because it's very self-explanatory. So the first step, we need to have data. We need the data retrieved from the DealStats or other sources. So I just step by step to show you how I do this. For example, we have as I say, for this sample company, we have 3 lines of business. One is the metal fabrication, one is the metal finishing, the rest of one is the metal wholesale. So we can click here. Now you have pop up the windows, tell you to locate the download Excel file. At this stage, I assume we have already downloaded.
If I could interrupt you, Frank, my apologies. Yep. I wasn't very clear. Before we do that, could we please show them, if you just can log into DealStats and do an export of the data? My apologies. So the concept here is to log into the DealStats BV Resources site and log in. Obviously, you need to be able to log in to get that. The reason why Frank is looking feverishly for the username and password is because he has it
Yep.
programmed on his desktop,
Yeah.
but this
Because
is
we are
not
the
his
local
desktop right
desktop.
now.
It's not the okay. Basically, when you log in the DealStats, you basically will see this page will tell you what do you have. I mean, under your subscription. For example, now we have this DealStats, just including the 1,000 unique transaction. So we can click here to bring us to this page. This gives you how to say the general give you everything you have in these stats based on the different line of business, or you can select if you know the NASCO or you know any specific search criteria, you can put them here. Okay, if I type in the keyword metal fabrications, it will tell you give you all the results the DealStats has. This including not just the private transaction, but also including the public transaction. So from here, you can select the either public or private. And basically, for me, I will use the recently transacted data. So I will select the sale date. And from here, you can pick which case or which company is comparable to your subject company in terms of a net sales. In our sample company, the sales are around 1 million. So basically, first of all, I will just cancel the click here, then select the subject company like this one. Okay, it's the fabrication. These two, maybe two, I mean, in terms of the revenue is greater than our targeted company. So we skip it. Then we select this one. Yeah, it's 2019. I mean, it's quite recently. And you can just scroll down those, all the list, all these data. And also you can see maybe, for example, they have a 6-page. They say we can select the 50 one. So in the one page, give you 50 data. So it's easy to select which one you need.
So from here, you can do a visual of your sampling data to select the ones that you want. If you want to, you can also upload them all and then select them within the FAT. So you have two options. You can pre-select the data that goes into your FAT and then reselect again, or you can export the whole data and then visualize it and select the appropriate data within the FAT itself by using perhaps either visual means, in terms of, do the net sales represent that? Do the EBITDA represent your subject company, and so on? Do the multiples, are they outliers? Do they appear to be outliers? So those are all criteria that you can decide on, and then you can use your coefficient of variation to determine which is the most applicable multiple that you will end up using. But back to this, you can see that Frank has now brought up that data. He has selected what he wants, and we're not going to spend a lot of time really analyzing because that's sort of a different subject. But here now, he's going to export this data into a spreadsheet. So go ahead and do that, Frank.
Okay. Now assume we have everything we need. Then we just click the tab download. Then you select here all available fields, or these two, you can select these two, all available fields or available fields with analysis tab. And then next step, you can click the Excel. There is a pop-up window. You just click the download, and then you can just open up to see where the data has already been downloaded to a local desktop or whatever the location you selected. Okay, we assume we already download the file, and we save it at here. Then you can rename it. For example, you have a couple of, the line of business. So to differentiate those, you can just rename this one is the metal fabrication. That one is the metal wholesale. So, or when you finish this step, which means you have the data you need to populate to FAT. So now we go back to FAT. So we click here, this the button, click this button. Then now we select this one, the metal fabrication. Okay, let's save it. Okay, now when you have see this window pop up, means the data have successfully imported into your FAT. Now you go back to this tab, see all the data, because we select the 8 data from the DealStats. So from here you can see all the data have been populated to the FAT. But here, let's take a look at this layout, okay? First one is tell you how many observations you download from DealStats. In this case, we have 8 available observation. They provide the sales multiple, but only 7 of provide the EBITDA multiple. This is tell you the number of observation in terms of the specific metrics or specific multiple. The next line is tell you is the coefficient of variance. Okay, coefficient of variance is the ratio of standard deviation to the mean. What tell you what is the why we put this in here? Because when you look at the coefficient of variance, it's tell you a specific value or a percentage. When the value is higher, which means the specific multiple in this case, or the specific value, is far away from the mean, which means that they have a great level of dispersion to a mean. This is very useful when you're looking at a data set, because for any data set, there's inevitably, say, there is some outlier exists. So when you use coefficient or the CV, you can tell you or to gauge, say, what is the outliers, what is the how reliable these data sets I download from DealStats of other source to do the comparison. To do the comparison. For example, we can take a look at these metrics. In terms of the sales multiple, it gives you a 0.73. Basically, we set the rules here because as we say, the higher of the coefficient variance means there is a higher variance or higher dispersion to the means. So in FAT, when the number of CV greater than 0.5, we can say, hey, maybe it's far away from the mean in terms of these eight observation. So in terms of using mean, we select the median as the metrics we use. And for example, in terms of the EBITDA multiple, oh, it's really good. Sorry, it's still not good. It's over, it's a 3.27. It's far away from the mean. So we also use the median. Let's say, let's select this one. For this one, you can see 0.22, which means very close to the mean. Okay, in this case, the mean could be used to gauge the SDE multiple. But here, just give you the general idea of the quality of the data you download. For some people, maybe it's very picky. They will say, hey, if I see the number is greater than 0.5, I decided to not use the DealStats, the data. Right, it makes sense because you have your judgment. You will say it's not the real comparable in terms of the, the CV. They give you the number is far away from the, let's say the mean. So you decide not to use. It's also give you the decision to make. So in this case, we have import the data from DealStats, as I say, to the 3 different lines of business. So at this step 1, after we import all the data, you can see all these metrics give you what is exactly you're looking for the next analysis. But here, there is one thing I have to mention. For example, in this first line of business, we have 8 observations. What if, let's say, okay, what if I have only one comparable or only one data download DealStats? What is going to happen? See, there's no number showed up. That because if we still remember the definition of a coefficient of variance, this is the standard deviation to the mean. And the standard deviation in here is the standard deviation of Zambari. So in the formula of standard deviation, the denominator is equal to number of observation minus 1. So if you have only one observation, the denominator will give you 0. That's the reason why you don't have any, the multiple will show up. So I would suggest our user to download more than 1, at least 2 or 3. That's the, this is also the design, is the purpose of design of using the DealStats, because you need more information, more data to support, to evaluate your subject company. Okay, when we finish the first step, import all those data. Now we go to the next one. The second step is now we have the benchmark data. We have subject company. So looks like? What's the comparison of these 2 set of data? So we set it to 3 different categories. The first one is
Frank, if I could just add to what you just said just before you go to that,
okay.
A good thing that I would recommend that you do as well is look at your data. Once you've looked at this section right here that Frank was just going through, look at the data itself, look at the samplings. So these are the samplings on your first one, these are the sampling on the second one, and these are the sampling on the third one. So look at the actual data and see if it all makes sense. For example, what are the sales? Let's look at the MVIC, by the way, which is the market value invested capital. That's a selling price of the business. So be careful, because I've seen people use that as the sales, the revenues of the business, and that is not what that is. This is the net sales right here. So if you look at your net sales and you've got a company, what is this what is the subject company sales or revenues, Frank?
It's 1 million. About
1 million.
1.2,
Okay.
1.3 million. Yeah.
So if we see a business in here that's got $150,000 worth of revenue, that may be an outlier, and so you may want to remove that from the data sampling, and you may get some better results in your CVs as well. Similarly, what I like to do is I like to look at, okay, what am I looking at? Am I looking at the multiple of EBITDA, or am I looking at the sales multiple once I've looked at that, or am I looking at the margins, or what am I looking at? And then I look at this data. For example, if we look at the adjusted EBITDA multiple, we have one here that's 0.29. That may be an outlier. I may not want that as part of my data. Again, we are not here to make the judgments for you. We are here to tell you that these are options that you have in removing some of these samplings. Here's another one that's negative. So what you may want to do is just remove this data from the sampling. So you don't have to use everything that's there. You can remove some of the consideration, you can remove some of the data, and I believe that in your version all you have to do is highlight it and don't know if, clear contents, I believe. Is that correct, Frank?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So if you highlight the row that you want the data removed that isn't applicable, then you simply remove it by clearing the contents. And even though it's a blank cell, it will not be considered in the data. One thing to bear in mind in the FAT, never delete cells, because you may be deleting formulas that are critical to the assessment that you're doing. And so it's never a good idea to delete rows or columns within the FAT itself. You can delete cells and columns within the working sheets, but not within the FAT sheets themselves. So having said that, let's now go back to the analysis that Frank was starting on. So back to you, Frank.
Okay, now we have data from the DealStats and the subject company. We do the comparison in terms of sales, see what the difference between these two set of data. See, in this case, seems like the subject company have a higher revenue than the average benchmark or average data we download from DealStats. So this is to show you that it seems like it's a premium. But we're talking about how we.
If I can just make a correction there, it's lower than the average data that we selected from and kept from DealStat, not necessarily what we have downloaded, because what we've downloaded we may have also removed or excluded from our data points.
It just gives the average, just in terms of comparing to the average
samplings
the cells, was selected. So the next we can say the profitability. The profitability we choose from three matrix. One is the EBITDA margin, the EBIT margin, and the steady margin. And in this case, you can see this subject company a little bit lower comparing to the benchmark in terms of the EBITDA margin, and over 3.2% of the lower in terms of the SDE. And the next section is about efficiency. Efficiency, we give it two metrics. One is the total asset turnover, and asset inventory turnover ratio. Basically, you will have, in some cases, you don't have the number here because the DealStats doesn't provide it. But if you have, you can have some comparison to see how efficient of this company in terms of the comparing to the benchmark. So when you have this intuitive comparison, then leads you to the step 3. So in the step 3, you can look at what we have in the step 2, this comparison, to incorporate either premium or discount to your subject company, or let's say to the final the multiple. So in this case, we notice that in terms of the sales, the subject company is greater than the average selected sampling. So we can, here I just used a logarithm to try to avoid the effective of scale to give the proper premiums to this company. In this case, you see we compared these two, almost a 2.39% of premiums of in terms of the size. But in terms of the profitability, I average the difference of these three. See, there's a -1% in terms of, I'm comparing to the benchmark. So also you can have other judgments based on you believe it's reasonable to put the formula or put the number here to, give you the criteria or give you the principle to judge, to make the judgment. When you do all these adjustments or judgment here, now you can see this is adjusted multiple, which means including all the premiums or discounts you put here. So from here you can see if we talk about the EBITDA multiple, the unadjusted one is 3.36, but here is 3.39. It's incorporated facts here.
So it's important to bear in mind that these are judgments. As we all know, valuations are all about judgments. And so the objective here is to make as reasonable a judgment as you possibly can, but it is still subjective. It's an art, it's not a science. Mm-hmm. And so the thing to bear in mind here is, let go of the mouse, Frank.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
Thanks. That's okay. The important thing to bear in mind is that if, this, for example, we have a standard default formula in there, but you don't have to use that. You can use your own judgment and discretion to provide either a discount or a premium for the variance between the subject company and the samplings. And as Frank was saying, you can pick standard items here that we have put in as defaults. So, for example, discount for economic conditions. That would be equal to, if most of your data is 2006 data, well, the economic conditions have changed now, and so you may want to give that data a discount. For those that are in Canada and most of the data is US, you may want to give that a discount or a premium based on that. And of course, you can also bypass whatever this is by simply typing over discount for whatever. Okay, so you can override all of these, and of course you can enter there. No, it's not allowing me to.
It's a drop down list, so we could not.
Are we not able to override these? We used to be able to. We should be able to override these.
Okay.
So that might be something to put in the
functions.
in the next update,
sure.
Frank, because this for some reason got locked down. The user needs to be able to put in their own description of the adjustment. And
can you just do one, let's say SD or some reason, and just see how would you calculate like a percent? Just do one, and how would that relate?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
just one.
Let's assume that I've typed in here discount for economic condition, or let's assume that I've selected that, and that when I look at this data is all I could get, and it was mostly old data. And so I may give this data of the samplings a discount of whatever, let's say 5%. Okay, now you will see that the data, this is the unadjusted multiples, and of course you will select the multiples based on your CV, and this is the adjusted multiple right here. You can see that if I put a 0 there, it's going to change my multiples over here. So that's really all you do.
So if a grocery store did better, you would put like 5 or 10% on the upside, and they will change all the numbers to the upside.
Correct.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Correct. On top of that, the other thing that to bear in mind here is that this data typically, and depends where your data is from, but you know, this particular data would already include, we know that it already includes inventory. And so what do we want to do? Do we want to add, is this a stock sale or is this an asset sale? If it's an asset sale and it includes the inventory, then you want to include the inventory only or exclude the inventory. So this gives you the ability to include regular normal working capital. In this case, it appears to be 100,000, or inventory only, so plus inventory. In this particular case, there is 0 inventory, but let's assume that there was $30,000 worth of inventory that was included in this particular business, and in the working capital, you would then say plus inventory only if it wasn't included in this data. But if it's included in this data, then obviously you don't want to do that. You want to exclude normal working capital, excluding inventory. And of course, if you are in the US particularly, and you are doing an asset sale, oops, pardon me, I picked the wrong one there. And you're doing an asset sale, then you would not want to include working capital. Your data would have 0 over here. So if your working capital is excluded, but the average inventory value is, let's say, $30,000. By the way, these numbers would have been transferred from the balance sheet. But you can see that now I have the option in my fields here to add $30,000 or remove $30,000. In this case, I've $30,000 in inventory, but no working capital that I'm transferring. So you've got to exclude that because it's already included in here, and so on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to include or exclude inventory or working capital. What the FAT will then do is it'll take these multiples and incorporate that into the enterprise value of the subject company based on the subject company sales, EBITDA, EBIT, SDE, and so on. It then extrapolates the multiple for the subject company based on this number. And that number is then transferred over to the MPSP input, pardon me, up here, under the direct market data. So this is the formula that's in here. And again, I believe you can override this formula if you want to, but by default, it takes it from the DealStats method. And then of course here you can select whether the multiple is of SDE, EBIT, EBITDA, or revenue, and of course whether, you know, we want this method included or excluded, because you may find that this is erroneous. Let's say that your data gives you a multiple of 1.5 and you know this business is better than that. Well, you may not want to include this particular methodology. So that's really the import to the DealStats. We'll just maybe pause unless you need to add anything, Frank, and get some questions, and then we'll go through all 4 of these items real quickly.
Hi, Peter. I've got a quick question.
Yes.
On when you're comparing direct market data, sometimes you want to use percentage of revenue versus some weighting that versus this percentage of SDE, multiple of SDE. Where is that handled in the FAT?
Well, it's handled in a number of places. So first of all, when you are dealing with the imports of the data, this is where the import of the data is. This is the multiple of sales. This is, or percentage of sales. This is a multiple of EBITDA, EBIT, SDE, and so on. You can look at your CV and decide which is best for you to use. You then go down here, and again, you can pick the one that you desire based on, you know, your data. You then go back to the MPSP input, and you will see that again, you can select here that particular multiple. Now let's assume that I don't want that multiple. I'm going to put in my own. I'm going to put in 4.5, and it's a multiple of EBITDA. Or I'm going to put in 2.1 and select a multiple of SDE. So this is where you change these, but again, it's all judgment. It's all, you know, based on your assumptions. What you can also do is you can also put in your equal sign in there, and then go to your deal stats and pick out whichever you want. In this case, we're going to pick the multiple of EBIT, and there it is. And I'm just going to change this as a multiple of EBIT. So you can have it do the work itself, or you can override it to your discretion.
Okay, there's no place for it to be kind of weighting the revenue and the, when you use a combination of both?
Yes, you can. But the way you would do that using these three,
okay.
Right? So if you're using the industry multiple, for example, instead of using generic industry, you may take this and go back to your deal stats and take your sales multiple, which is this one.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, and now change this to sales. And in this case, it would be inclusive of inventory because we have it. Now you can weight the methods over here.
Okay.
And you can actually use the guideline method, if you would, or you can use the industry percentage rule.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I probably should have used that up there, but you know, you can use these as well if you want to, just simply by, you know, including these, and then you can, you know, I can do the same thing here. Equals, go to deal stats and pick my multiple, and there it is. Okay, so you actually have 4 places or 4 different multiples that you can use if you really wanted to. Did that answer the question?
Thank you. Yes, it did.
Okay. Any other questions?
For a small business, what's the ideal 2 or 3 to use, or do you use all 4 in there? Like, what's the optimum way to get that MPSP up, you know?
I don't know that there is an optimum, quite frankly. Each business is different, and each appraiser is going to have their own judgment that they will make. You know, but for me, earnings are always more important than revenue, for example. So I would tend to give more weight or value to earning multiples such as EBIT, EBITDA, or SDE. If it's a real small business, it likely is the SDE multiple you're looking for. If it's a larger business, it may be EBIT or EBITDA that you want to use. If it's a software business, for example, software as a service, it might be the percentage of revenue that's more relevant. Even though they're only doing $1 million in sales, a percentage of revenue in that particular industry is more relevant because that's what they use, because most of these SaaS companies actually end up losing money. And so in those cases, the revenue multiple is better. There is no one size fits all.
Pino, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So you currently have this set up to directly import deal stats and one other, I forgot what it was. Let's say
just
I
deal
did,
stats right now, actually.
Oh, just deal stats. Okay.
Yep.
So let's say I have BizComp data and I put it in a Excel file in the same columns that the data is shown in the DealStat columns. Can I just import that directly? And
Correct.
okay.
Yep,
So,
you can.
okay.
But we will be working in a conversion sheet so that we will use, this is my concept, and Frank may shoot me once we get off the webinar here, but my concept is that we're going to have one import sheet, and then we'll have a conversion sheet where the user will have the ability to import the data from whether it's PratStats or BizComps or IBI or whatever, and it'll convert it into that sheet by matching the fields, and then you'll be able to import from anything. So that's the concept that we will be looking at down the road. Any other questions? Okay, Frank, let's go through.
Peanut, can you import more than just one source? Like in that particular scenario, you're only converting it from XYZ to DealStats versus.
Yeah, I think to Barry's question, you can use multiple sources and import from multiple sources, but all of the data sampling must be in the same format as the DealStat spreadsheet. And so long as you enter that data in the spreadsheet the way in that same format, then yes, you can import from multiple sources.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Frank, why don't I pass it back to you now, and let's start with the guideline method, and then just very briefly touch base on the industry multiple and percentage rules.
Okay, so we start from the okay, we can start from the guideline method. Basically, if you can find a plentiful or qualified comparables from DealStats or other sources, we would suggest to use those data, and they will show you in the direct market data here. But if, for example, the subject company belong to a very niche market, and you find, if you searched online and you search the data, you find a very few comparable you can find out to as a comparable, as a data to import in the DealStat into the FAT. Now, but instead you see in the public listed company, you have a lot of I mean the transaction, previous transaction, very similar to this business, very similar to this company. So you can try to find these multiple from this public listed company, then put the, how to say, we can go back to see the methodology here. Is the guideline ever say you searched online, you find out the public company, they have a reasonable or very solid multiple, you can download or can use the multiple. But before that, you need to do the extra work, because the data is from the public company. Now you are looking for a public or small business. So the extra premiums or discounts or risks should be considered into this multiple. For example, let's say the public company, maybe just a 2.5%, 2.5 in terms of SDE multiple.
No, it's not going to be, if it's a public company, it's not going to be an SDE multiple. It's going to be an EBITDA.
Sorry, the EBITDA, sorry. I just give the example, the EBITDA. So, but here you can give a, let's say, you give a discount, let's say 0.8, because in terms of the risk. So this is what you do using the guideline method. The guideline method is basically just so you have your own judgment in terms of when you have a limited information from the private company.
We did a concrete manufacturing and precast company valuation that was in the name. It was a private company. It was in the neighborhood of, I'm going to say, $12 million. But there's been so much consolidation within that industry that really the only meaningful data was public data. And so we went ahead and looked at private equity info and others. There is also some public data in DealStats, by the way. You may recall that Frank showed you how to switch that from the toggle, yeah, right there. And so you can select public, and but then you can see that in this particular case, there's nothing. And so they don't have a lot of public data there compared to private equity info or some other sources. Once you have assessed that, then you have to make your judgment in terms of giving a discount or a premium. Now, when we looked at this particular data in that concrete manufacturing business, the data was all over the multiples were all over the place. There were multiples as high as 18 and 20 times EBITDA, and it was absurd. We took the average. I think the average was about an 8 times multiple. So we had to make some decisions and some assumptions and some judgments. We took all of that data and we weighted whatever we could, and then we took the public data and discounted based on the different sizes. I mean, some of these deals were hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And so, you know, how relevant is it? How much do you have to discount it? And so it's always, this is nothing more than a placeholder, if you would, for you to put the data in. And then it's important, as Frank showed you, to put in a formula there so that you know what you've done. And you may want to go one step further, and that is to add a note here, pardon me, to add a note here in terms of, you know, what you've done. Just put in a comment, and then you can always go back here and know that you've put in that comment and what you've done and why you've done it. You can actually put in a whole bunch of data in there in terms of, you know, where you got the data from, what it is, and so on, so that you can always go back and look at that. And of course, even though that public guideline method does have all 4 of these, typically in the public arena, it's EBIT and EBITDA. But we do have all of these because, as I mentioned earlier, we may use this guideline method because it's a placeholder for another set of data that we may want to consider that is not really public companies, but it's private companies. So it does give you that flexibility. Back to you, Frank.
Okay. Let's talk about the industrial percentage rule and industrial multiple rule. Basically, you got the information from the, from the other sources, like a business reference guide or first research for that specific industry. It would tell you, usually would tell you the industry, the average multiple in terms of the revenue. If you could say, let's say this, in this case, the business guide just give you 44% of the revenue for the average of this business. And you can see if the multiple already included the inventory or not. If I say this 44% of the revenue already including the revenue, you can select it here. But if I say nothing, or just let's say 44% of revenue, you can have to make judgments, say, hey, have to plus the average inventory by itself. And also here you can see if the multiple already including the FFE and at the fair market, you can put here. But if it's not, if it's based on the net book value, you can change from here. The same as you search the multiple, let's say the EBITDA or SDE from first research, you give the same. You can put the number here, and follow what they say, if it's including the inventory or excluding inventory or including the PPE. That's the idea of these two methods in general.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, Frank. So the one
Frank,
comment,
quickly.
sorry, one last comment that I will make is don't forget that if you just hover your mouse over each one of these, Frank, let go of the mouse,
Yep.
you will find that it gives you a little write-up, a little pop-up window that tells you what that specific methodology does and how it works. Again, if you click on this particular, it'll take you to the actual methodology itself. Okay. Can you let go of the mouse for a second, please, Frank? Thank
Yep.
you. And the same applies to the approaches themselves. So you can get as granular as you want. And of course, when you're looking at whether it's BRG or IBIS World or First Research, you want to ask the questions of yourself when you are reading the information. Does this multiple that they give you include or exclude inventory? And then you can take action here accordingly. And does it include or exclude FF&Es or furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and at net book value or fair market value? Same with the inventory, because you may find that the inventory that you want to include here is just the average, or the recast inventory, meaning the inventory number that you will transfer at time of closing. So those are all different functionalities. That said, we're at 11:01, exactly an hour. Let's open up to questions.
I got a quick one.
Yes, Ish.
In the drop down versus NB and FV, like the net book and fair market, where are those numbers getting picked up from? Are they from the balance sheet or?
Yes, they are from the, if it's net book value, it'll be from the balance sheet. If it's fair market value, it'll be from your number that you would have put into right here, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. The fair market.
So you can put net book from the balance sheet and.
No, the net book comes from the balance sheet.
Okay.
Yeah, you can override it, but it comes from the balance sheet. But if if the value of the transferred assets is higher or lower than net book value, then you would have what we reference to here as the appraiser's fair market value, estimated fair market value of those assets. And that number there will be the number that will be picked up here. Any other questions?
Hi, Pino. Just a clarification for myself. I'm a little confused on the, normally, like when I like to reflect also what the Tom West's book is showing, just for the client's sake, for more than also for myself, for a record for down the road as well.
Yeah.
Typically, you have percentage of revenue, percentage of SDE on the Tom West side, and also on the direct market data. And so I need 4 places. Do you normally just use the top 2 industry percentage rule, industry multiple for Tom West and IBIS World, where the data and the direct market for, you can just pick one or the other, but I like to reflect both, like the revenue as well as the.
So direct market data is just that. It's a DMD, so that uses comparables.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have any comparables, and you want to use the data from whatever IBIS World, then you can do so.
Yeah. But
you're not restricted to that.
Yeah, but in terms of the direct, in our slot for on the FAT, there's only one place the direct market data comes in, it says direct market data. That's the multiple
Correct.
FAT calculates. But
That is
we can't
correct.
choose, we can't disseminate, hey, we're going to put 60% of the weighting to the revenue, 30% to the SDE. That kind of calculation is not done here, is it?
Yeah, it is. So here, for example, let's assume that we have taken this data from BRG, 44% of revenue. Let's assume that we got a 3.01 multiple of SDE, again from Tom West. And by the way, quite often BRG gives you a range. And so you'd want to look at the performance of your business. And if your business subject company, if the subject company's performance is down, you may want to select a low range. If it's higher, you may want to select a higher range and everything in between.
Yeah.
So assuming you've done that,
Okay.
you put that in here.
Okay.
Your direct market data, let's assume that it came from actual samplings that you took from DealStats.
Yeah.
And so now you have 3 of them. You can give each one of them a specific weighting.
Yeah.
So let's say
but-
that I think 10%
but you
to the revenue, 15% to SDE, and 20% to EBIT, for
Yeah,
example.
the BRG is fine. The industry multiple, those are fine. That's Tom West. That's perfect. But direct market, there's no way of disseminating. Hey, we're going to use percentage, but we can't use combination of both in there.
Well, you can, but you'd have to use, as I said earlier, you'd have to use one of the others. So if you want to use 2 for Tom West,
Yeah.
you can only use these 2 for the direct market. So
Okay.
you're limited to 2.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's what
That
I
makes
want.
sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you all for being on and spending this last hour with us.